So, good evening, afternoon, morning, whatever your time zone is. My name is Jeff Payne. I run the NESA Center's Indian Ocean Region Digital Series. This is the newest iteration, and I am very pleased to be joined by Mr. Pierre Morcos, who is currently with CSIS here in Washington, D.C. as a visiting fellow focused on Europe, Russia, and the Eurasia area. He's part of that program under the CSIS banner. But he's a career diplomat with the French Foreign Service. Most recently served as the deputy head of the Strategic Affairs and Cybersecurity Division, focusing on NATO, European defense issues, among others, over his long career. And certainly we'll have many more interesting things to come in the future. So we are here to discuss, in essence, two overarching topics. One, how France sees some of the issues developing in the Indian Ocean region, what interests France and potentially even the European Union have in the Indian Ocean region. And so we're going to launch right into the conversation. And so, Pierre, if you do not mind, the first question to you is, how does France, and even if you could allude to maybe some of the larger European Union as a whole questions or approaches, balance an intensified interest in the Western Pacific as part of global trade and global security concerns with the security challenges of Europe itself and adjacent regions, particularly the Mediterranean and, of importance to this conversation, the Red Sea?
Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for having me today. And this is clearly an excellent question, if not the question Europeans have to address today, because they have a global geopolitical outlook. They try to be active worldwide, from their neighborhood to more distant regions, notably in the Indo-Pacific. But at the same time, they have limited means, especially in the defense domain. As you know, after the Cold War, European countries have reduced their defense spending quite significantly. And just to give you an order of figures, between 1999 and 2018, European navies lost a third of their main surface combatants, so frigates or destroyers. So clearly, there is a question of mass and of credibility of Europeans to be actors in regions such as the Indo-Pacific. So now, how can we address that conundrum? Some experts, notably in Washington, believe that Europeans should focus first and foremost on their neighborhood and leave other regions, notably the Indo-Pacific, to other actors, including the United States. But I think that can be a mistake, and that clearly is not acceptable for Europeans, starting with France, because we have overseas territories across the Indo-Pacific, with islands in the Indian Ocean, such as La Réunion or Mayotte, and archipelagos in the South Pacific, with New Caledonia and Polynesia. And for France, the stability of the Indo-Pacific is not a distant question. This is a matter of sovereignty, of security, and we cannot afford withdrawing from that region. But this also applies to other European countries, such as Germany or the UK, whose prosperity, whose national security are also closely tied to the stability of the Indo-Pacific, and they are willing to be more active in the region. As you know, London has revealed its integrated review a few months ago, in which it mentions a tilt toward the Indo-Pacific, and the aircraft carrier of the UK was deployed in the region. And similarly, also Germany is also more and more active in the Indo-Pacific, with a new dedicated strategy, the deployment of a frigate. So clearly Europeans are willing to play a role in that region. So how can we find a trade-off between this ambition to be active in the Pacific and these limited means? I think the only solution is to act collectively. That's the only way forward, and to make sure that Europeans, with their limited assets, are closely coordinated when acting in the region. And just to give you a short example, the EU has launched an initiative which is quite interesting, which is called Coordinated Maritime Defenses, which was first experimented in the Gulf of Guinea, and now could be implemented in the Western Indian Ocean. And under this mechanism, European navies commit themselves to be more coordinated and to make sure that their naval assets are strictly and tightly coordinated to maximize their effects and to have, I would say, a multiplier effect. I think this is the only way to make sure that Europeans can have a useful contribution to the maritime security of these regions.
Well, thank you. That's a fascinating jump-off point, because among a lot of conversations that I've had, I was at the Shangri-La Dialogue in 2019, right after France unveiled its Indo-Pacific Strategy, and I was a cheerleader for it because what I loved about it is it clearly stated a ceiling and a floor. That France was realistic about what its capabilities were in the higher side of complication, but also a commitment that we are not going to dip below this level, that this is the range we can expect. And you compare that to, say, the United States' concept of the Indo-Pacific, which is far more expansive, and it doesn't narrow down. The follow-up question I have for you, based upon what you just said, is this common approach that you say is Europeans' future when it comes to the Indo-Pacific and maritime security. Do you think that the European powers individually will communicate amongst themselves and start specializing in niche capabilities? That maybe Spain is more adept at certain maritime operations versus France, which emphasizes others, versus Italy, which does something different, versus Germany, which does a fourth thing. Do you think that's the approach, or is it more a comprehensive rotational response where everyone will have the same capabilities but will be able to deploy in a joint kind of rotational phase?
Well, that's again an excellent question. What is our level of ambition among Europeans? And clearly we do not have the same operational ambitions when it comes to maritime security. Clearly France has high-end capabilities with submarines, an aircraft carrier, high-end frigates, and is also ready to engage in high-intensity scenarios. And this is clearly one priority of the French Navy now, to be prepared for such scenarios against potential peer competitors. On the contrary, other countries are more reluctant to play a role in such situations, notably Germany, because of their political culture, and are more comfortable with low-end missions, such as the fight against piracy, the fight against illegal fishing. And I think we need to be pragmatic in that regard, and to make the most of each European member state's assets and added value. Clearly, France is pushing Europeans to be the most ambitious possible, and make sure that they also prepare themselves for high-intensity scenarios. Notably, navies such as Italy can clearly play a role in that regard. But we are also realistic, and we know that Germany cannot go as far as we would like, but they can make a useful contribution in other types of missions. So the short answer is that we push Europeans to be more present, engaged in maritime security, but we also acknowledge that they can only go to a certain direction, to a certain limit, and we need to be pragmatic about that.
Well, thank you. As a follow-up to that, in particular to France, which has been a major actor in the Western Indian Ocean historically because of its close ties, obviously the presence of its own overseas territories, deep relationships with a lot of Eastern African states. Beyond the security sphere, and looking at the Indian Ocean region, what are the challenges you think that are higher on the French government's priority list Is it economic development? Is it non-state actors? Is it rules and norms? Is it, kind of littoral development, newer ports, better connectivity? What sort of debates are being discussed in Paris regarding the Western Indian Ocean and even the broader Indian Ocean, if you want to open it up even further?
Well, beyond the security realm, and I would like maybe to mention also our perception of the security challenges, but beyond that question, I think that the main concern for France is to ensure the sustainable development of the region. And one issue which is of particular concern for Paris is the impact of climate change in the region, and in the economy and the sustainability of the region. As you said, France has territories there, as I said, the islands La Réunion and Mayotte, and they are biodiversity hotspots, but they are at the forefront of the consequences of climate change in terms of the warming of the oceans, the multiplication of natural disasters, the rise of sea levels, and clearly this has an impact on their economy and on their stability. So clearly France is trying to be engaged in that domain, to also harness the tools and assets of the European Union, which is also more and more engaged in that region. But we face one major limitation, which is the lack of true regional architecture and of true cooperation among the littoral states of the Western Indian Ocean. So that's why France is trying also to be more active in multilateral fora, such as the Indian Ocean Commission, which is chaired by France currently, but also the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which France has actually joined in December 2020. So clearly France is trying to build multilateral solutions to these problems. Now, maybe one word on security challenges, if I may, because this is clearly one issue of concern for France. And I would say that there are two types of threats from a French perspective. The first category is the transnational threats, such as piracy off the coast of Somalia, drug trafficking in the northern part of the Indian Ocean, illegal fishing in the southern parts of the Indian Ocean, and these transnational threats are clearly a concern for Paris. But which is more concerning is the return of a form of great power competition also in the region. One wake-up call moment for Paris was the creation of a maritime base by China in Djibouti in 2015, where France has also a naval base. And this was clearly a sobering moment for Paris, because we realized that the military reach of Beijing was more and more important, and was including the Indian Ocean. And another example is also the destabilizing actions of Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, notably in the summer of 2019, and the risk of escalation in that region, which is critical for our supply of oil. And this led France to launch a maritime security operation in the Strait of Hormuz together with other European partners, notably the Netherlands and Denmark, to calm down the situation and to avoid an escalation. So this element of the return of state-to-state confrontation is clearly a concern for France, and is also quite vivid in the Indian Ocean.
Well said. Yeah, I was going to turn to the security things. You jumped ahead, but I'm going to ask you a follow-up pertaining to what you just talked about. With the first part, we're talking about transnational challenges and threats in the Indian Ocean. The multilateral environment of the Indian Ocean region, from a very 30,000-foot level, seems very strong. I mean, there's the Indian Ocean Commission, there's the Indian Ocean Rim Association, there's the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. There's all sorts of sub-regional and continental-based organizations that look towards the health of the seas and the ocean. But there is a perception in the region that there's not a lot of trust among regional states. And this, as you mentioned, overtly impedes the ability to counter everything from IUU fishing to illegal dumping to all sorts of smuggling and trafficking. What is kind of Paris's thinking regarding how to overcome the trust deficit that exists throughout the Indian Ocean Rim?
That is a true challenge, because as you mentioned, the different regional organizations are clearly representative of a form of soft multilateralism with non-binding decisions, decisions taken on consensus. So clearly the lack of trust is a huge stumbling block in their ability to deliver. I think that Paris is well aware of these limitations, and the approach of France is really pragmatic, and to have an output-oriented approach to make sure that these organizations, whether despite these internal limitations, can have an impact. So how can we do that? Let me take the example of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, whose France actually is chairing currently for the coming year, and France is trying to use this forum, which is gathering 25 member states, and is trying to build cooperation among their navies. So France is trying to use this forum to have really tangible, simple cooperations, and to act on issues where we can find consensus, we can have a shared approach. And I mentioned earlier environmental security, and this is the priority pushed by France under the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, because we think that environmental security is a shared challenge among all littoral states, and we all could benefit from a cooperative approach on that. And the proposals put forward by France are really sensible and simple. It's about information sharing. It's about maritime exercises. It's about sharing best practices. It's about also sending young naval officers in our respective navies. So clearly simple, tangible steps, but which are critical to build trust and to create the potential conditions for a larger and more ambitious cooperation on other issues. But we need to start with these little steps on issues of shared interest before thinking about more sensitive and ambitious goals. So that's the pragmatic approach put forward by France.
Well, I would concur with a lot of it, because I think familiarity builds information sharing, which in turn builds trust. Okay. Liaison officers are key. I mean, all of these things are good steps, and honestly, India has also kind of shared from the Eastern Indian Ocean side of things a similar approach. But as a follow-up to that, to turn to the second, strategic competition between the major powers. Obviously, the focus, especially of the United States, is on the Western Pacific. And some see the Indian Ocean region as a place where competition will rise to the kind of strategic apex, but a lot of people still think the Indian Ocean is going to be a backwater when it comes to strategic competition. How do you, or even the French government, interpret that? Do you see the Indo-Pacific becoming more important in the years to come, or is it still going to primarily be a Western Pacific-oriented competitive framework with the Indian Ocean as one of the theaters? I guess it's a question about the concept itself that I think is important to ask, because it's so often not clarified for a lot of people.
Well, from a French perspective, we try to have the the larger geographical approach as possible when it comes to the Indo-Pacific. Actually, our definition of the Indo-Pacific is quite large. It's from the South Pacific to the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of Africa. And we, among Europeans, we have also pushed our Europeans to have this geographical definition of the Indo-Pacific, which is clearly larger than the US one. So why we have such a large scope? Because we believe that the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean are equally important, and we should clearly have a balance between these two areas. Clearly, there is a growing focus on the Western Pacific and the Southeast Asia, where clearly there are major hotspots and risks of escalation. But we also believe that the stability of the Indian Ocean is critical, because this is a region where our major economic, energetic, and so on flows pass through. So the stability of the region is critical, essential for the prosperity and the stability of Europe. So we should not forget that region, which is fraught of, as I said, transnational threats, which can clearly hamper the stability of that part. And as you mentioned, when we talk about great power competition and the competition with Beijing, it's not limited to the security domain. It's larger than that, and we have noticed that the Belt and Road Initiative pushed by Beijing is quite present in that region, in the Indian Ocean, with projects of infrastructures, of also undersea cables, which are critical for Beijing and could limit our room of maneuver in that region. So again, also that dimension, the economic dimension of the competition with Beijing is also quite vivid in the Indian Ocean, and we should not forget that.
Well, I concur with your concept. I think I'm a lone voice and among the American side that thinks our concept should be a little bit more expansive. But that's a conversation for another day. We've been talking about the present, and you have been very succinct and comprehensive in describing the current policy. Being that I work at the NESA Center and we're focused on trends and trying to, in the best way we can, be prognosticators for the future, what do you see as some of the key trend lines as it relates to the Indian Ocean that France or the European Union itself is concerned about? Is it a continuation of the current threats? Are there new threats on the horizon? Will climate change move from something we're trying to correct to something we have to mitigate? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can approach it. So what are some of your insights there?
I think the point you just made about climate change is critical and is clearly an area of deep concern for Paris. As you said, for the moment, we are just trying to correct the aftershocks of global warming, but increasingly this trend will have a major impact on the security and stability of that region. So that's why we are trying to increase the collective awareness about that and to focus the work of the regional organizations on that, because it would be more and more impactful in that region. A second trend, as I mentioned, is the growing presence of China in the region. It started with the military base in Djibouti, and we are concerned that China might also create other military footprints in the region and beyond, and we should really be focused about that and make sure that it does not hamper our sovereignty and our ability to act in that region. Another issue maybe I didn't mention is the proliferation of arms of destructions, of massive destructions, also more generally the the huge increase of capabilities across the region. This is also a matter of concern for France, the fact that all the major navies of the region are increasing their naval assets, are more and more deployed. This creates the conditions for unwarranted escalation. And France also is trying to build some rules of behavior, some lines of communications to make sure that we avoid such scenarios. And the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium is also a way to create that trust, these trust building mechanisms to avoid escalation. So these would be the three trends: environmental security, the growing presence of China, and the risk of escalation because of this arms race in the region.
Well, thank you. That's the last one, especially given that it's providing new data. It's very true. It's a clear observation, but not something that is routinely talked about. A final question for you, if you don't mind, if you will humor me, and that is, a lot of the states of the Indian Ocean littoral they have the conditions for potentially a massive economic growth in terms of the past performances. There's a youth bulge in the region. There's a lot of entrepreneurial energy. While trust is not being built, there are more lines of communication and connectivity that's being built throughout Eastern Africa, among the Indian Ocean island states, throughout South Asia and Southeast Asia. But these smaller developing states have real questions about how they approach and partner with larger powers. And given that France is one of these larger powers operating in the Indian Ocean region, what is the approach for invigorating a bilateral relationship with a developing state in the Indian Ocean that France favors? The U.S. often leads with technical assistance and military cooperation, but what is kind of the decided methodology that Paris favors when it comes to those scenarios?
On that, I think the French approach is twofold. First, be more and more engaged in regional organizations, because we think that alone we are not powerful enough to have a decisive impact. We have limited means when it comes to foreign assistance and military capabilities, so we need to act through regional organizations. So that's why, as I said, France is chairing the Indian Ocean Commission, has joined the Indian Ocean Rim Association a few years ago, because we think that multilateralism is the only answer to these local demands. The second venue to answer that challenge is the European Union. Clearly, France sees the EU as a way to augment its impact in the world. And the EU has clearly quite a huge experience when it comes to assisting partners countries in their development projects, and has quite powerful tools in that regard. So we try to push the EU to be more active. As I forgot to mention, but the EU revealed a few months ago its Indo-Pacific Strategy, actually the day after the announcement of AUKUS, and this strategy has a large scope from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and one aspect of that strategy is to support the sustainable development of that region, not only their infrastructures needs, but also to foster the youth mobility of the region. So clearly, the EU is a powerful venue to respond to the demands of the local countries.
Well, thank you. Not only very enlightening, but also incredibly detailed information that assists me, and I'm sure our audience and alumni from around the world who have questions about France, which I will say it comes up often in our engagements is what is France doing in relation to the Indian Ocean? How is France going to participate beyond what we kind of already know from the headlines? So this, I think, is a good first step, and I know that NESA will certainly lean upon your expertise in times to come. And so, final, just wanted to say thank you so much for carving out time from your busy schedule and joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey.